Yes, this is the November EduSpots Ignite talk, and we have a very special guest tonight, this evening, Alison Maynard, and she's going to be talking about meeting the diverse needs of learners, strategies for inclusive pedagogy. Now, I've actually heard Alison give this presentation or a very similar one, and it is really fascinating. It's a real eye-opener. So everybody is in for a treat this evening. You're really going to learn a lot. So thank you, everyone, for joining. So this is what we're going to be going through this evening. Now, these Ignite talks are organised by EduSpots, and of course, we welcome all our staff and catalysts, but it's also open to the public. So in case there are people here who don't already know about EduSpots, we'll just briefly introduce the organisation and talk a little bit about these talks, and then we'll go on to meeting our guest, who will give her presentation, and then there will be a chance for questions and answers afterwards, and then we'll finish off with a few announcements. So if you don't already know about EduSpots, this is what we do. So we connect, train and equip over 300 local catalysts. Now, catalyst is what we call our volunteers because they really ignite change in their communities. So that's why we like the word catalyst. And they work out of around 50 community-led spots across Ghana and Kenya, most in Ghana, but we do have a couple in Kenya. And when we say a spot, that's what we call our, if you like, our education learning spaces. Some of them are in schools, some of them are libraries, some of them are in the community. So they're a very diverse, different types of facilities, but we call them spots. And at those spots, our catalysts coordinate different educational programs. So we call them like EduLit, which is literacy, or in fact, soon it will be changing to DigiLit. It will include digital skills. EcoSTEM, which is practical STEM and environmental education. Ignite Equity.
Sorry to interrupt. We can see the screen.
Oh, did you see the first screen?
No, I didn't.
Oh, so you haven't. Oh, okay, okay. So let me come out again. You know what? Let me just do it with the PowerPoint. Hold on. Sorry about that. Just give me 1 second. Oh, I know what I did. Hold on, hold on. So sorry. There we go.
We can see it now.
Okay, let me just go to. Okay. So can you see the screen now?
Yes, we can.
Brilliant. So sorry about that. Okay. So yes, I was just talking about EduSpots. Yes, so our catalysts coordinate these different educational programs, as I said, literacy, science, gender equity, and also early years programs within these spots, these education spaces. And we've worked out that we actually give opportunities to over 10,000 children throughout all these spots. And the unique thing about EduSpots is that these facilities are community led. So they're owned by the communities. They have to have a very strong kind of community team backing them. And then what we do is we just basically help support them with training and help connecting them together. So we really have a network of these spots all across the country so they can share ideas and learn from each other. So apart from the various educational activities that go on, we also have these Ignite talks, which we try and do about once a month on Zoom. We find brilliant people who are leaders in their fields, usually in fields related to what we do. It could be community development, literacy, or science. Or we've had them on, sustainable development, on businesses, sustainable businesses, all sorts of very interesting topics. And the idea is that this is to help empower our volunteers, our staff, and wider stakeholders, everyone who's involved with EduSpots. But these are also open to the general public. And they're free just for everyone to enjoy and learn. So who do we have this evening for this evening's Ignite talk? So I'm very excited to introduce you to Alison Maynard, our speaker for this evening. As you can see, she's an educational professional with a great deal of experience, over 3 decades of experience. And what is included in her career, things like serving as the Director of Learning Support and Special Educational Needs and the Disability Coordinator at Sevenoaks School in Kent, that's in UK, from 2009 to 2022. She also leads a department of support teachers and trains classroom teachers in all the areas of teaching students with diverse needs. And as well as that, she also has experience as a French and English teacher across different school levels, primary, middle, and secondary school levels. So really a lot of experience there. And as I said, today she's going to be talking about how we deal with the needs of diverse learners. And here at EduSpots, as I've just said, we have all these different educational facilities across Ghana. The catalysts who are with us, you'll know you have so many different types of learners. I hope this is going to be very useful for you. So Alison, if I can go over to you.
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. I don't know, I hope you can all hear me and see me, and I'm delighted to be here tonight to talk to you all about helping with neurodiversity teaching and supporting students with diverse needs in the classroom. And I'd like to be able to share my screen. So let's see if I can do that easily. Hopefully I can. And can everybody see that now? I'm hoping you can. Excellent. That's really good. So we're going to talk then about meeting the needs of diverse learners, or meeting the diverse needs of learners is another way of putting it, I suppose. And I'm going to go through some of the difficulties and the differences that students in your classrooms or indeed teachers teaching those classes may face. So all classrooms, of course, will include learners who learn differently. Just like in any community, we have a mixed community of people with different gifts and different challenges. And some of the challenges that are presented come from diagnosis of learning difficulties, but of course we need to support them whether they have those that diagnosis or not. So what I'd like to do today is just to talk about the most common challenges we're faced with in the classroom, and what we can do to help best support them. Of course, I'm very conscious that I'm talking to a group of people who have diverse experience in this field as well. So you may know a lot of what I'm going to say, or you may not. And I just hope that something that I say this evening will be of use to you. So looking at the most common specific learning difficulties that certainly in my teaching experience have been present in my classes and in indeed my friends and my family and people I know and people I work with. Attention deficit disorder. You will know, I think, that probably in the last 10 years or so, increasingly people are being diagnosed with some sort of attention deficit. Similarly, with autistic spectrum conditions, which is an impaired development of the social gene, increasingly people are getting the diagnosis of some ASD diagnosis. I think we're recognizing it more. Dyslexia and dyspraxia, we've recognized those for many years now. Dyslexia, a phonological processing deficit. which usually is associated with reading and writing, slow verbal processing speed, and difficulties with working memory, something we'll be talking about in a minute. And dyspraxia, a difficulty with the planning and organization of automatic movement. Interestingly, these two, when I first started teaching, were the ones that we were presented with mostly because they were being diagnosed, whereas the two at the top, increasingly, people are recognizing. But wherever the origin of these issues may be, the difficulties are often interlinked and very common. Whether it comes from some sort of dyslexia, a dyspraxia, attention difficulty, or an autism origin, the difficulties we're presented with are often the same. What may they be? Whether, even though people may not have diagnosis, what are those difficulties? I thought we'd look at these common barriers to learning today and go over a few of them and what we can do about it in our classrooms. A lot of students present with working memory difficulties, and there's been a very close correlation of difficulties with working memory and academic achievement. We'll talk about that in a second. Fine and gross motor skill problems, whether it be with writing or even getting dressed, organisation, drawing or sport. And then the ones associated mainly with dyslexic type difficulties, although they can come from other issues as well, reading difficulties, spelling and writing, so encoding and decoding text. Then, of course, poor self-esteem and anxiety. And we need to think about this in all classrooms because self-esteem is so important. Everybody should have the right to feel good about themselves. And of course, a low self-esteem can be associated with all these barriers that we're talking about already, but also can come from other origins too. Anxiety can come from environmental issues, of course, or difficulties with barriers to learning. Organizational difficulties can mean that your student may not be on time for their class, may not have the right equipment, and of course, English as the foreign language or not the first language, this is an issue which increasingly for everybody, but particularly in your context, may be an issue and is a barrier to learning, possibly. So let's talk about working memory first, because it's an incredibly important issue when talking about learning. And I'd like to perhaps give you an idea of what it is, first of all, if you are not unsure about working memory, what working memory is. I call it your mental notepad. And people apparently are born with a certain amount of working memory, and some people have bigger notepad than others. And to give you an idea of what this is, I'm going to read out a few numbers, and with your mute still muted, give a go at repeating these numbers once I've stopped saying them. So 6, 3, 5. I'm sure that you could repeat those back reasonably easily. 6, 3, 5. There's only 3 numbers, reasonably easily repeated. How about these numbers, though? I'm going to read out a few of numbers. Can you repeat them back after I've finished? 2, 1, 7, 3, 4, 6, 9, 5. That was 2, 1, 7, 3, 4, 6, 9, 5. Now, I would find that difficult to repeat, mainly because there's a lot of them. I said them quite fast, and your memory probably couldn't retain all of them. Some of you might have been able to do that. Some people are much better at it than others. And this time, I'm going to ask you to repeat them backwards. So I'll say them forwards, you repeat them backwards. 8, 1, 5, 9, 3, 2. I'm imagining that is more difficult. It was 2, 3, 9, 5, 1, 8 backwards. that gives you an idea of what working memory is. It's holding information in your head and then doing something with it. And many students with learning difficulties, and even with just challenges with working memory, find that very hard to do. And what's the consequence of that? Well, they may say or think, oh, I don't remember what we did last lesson. Other people remember, I feel stupid, so I'm going to behave like the stupid one in the class. Or they might just find it hard to find the word that they need, or forget to do the coursework. They thought they'd done it, they haven't. They might even say to you things like, well, I've finished, and you feel, well, actually, no, you haven't. I've also told you to do something else. Or they've even forgotten what you're supposed to be doing, or what somebody just said. So this, of course, means that students may hear the first part of a list and do the first part or the last part, but they can't remember what was in the middle, so they don't do the whole thing. They may zone out because it's too difficult to hold in their heads, and they won't retain the safety instructions that you give at the beginning of the class, for example. So if you say, walk out slowly, close the door behind you, and remember to take your books with you, they might remember the take your books with you, but they don't remember to walk out slowly. Of course, this has consequences. So what should we be doing to help reduce this barrier to learning? Well, repetition, important, very simple to do, repeating details the first time, the next time, and then a week later. A very easy thing, don't put more than 3 things in a list of instructions. Remember those numbers that you had to hold in your head earlier. As soon as there were more than 3, it was much more difficult to retain. If you do just give verbal instructions, write them down somewhere or illustrate them if you can. Check that your student has understood. Make it relevant to them. Why did I say that? What did I just say? Allow time for overlearning. Even 10 words of key vocabulary. Just allow them to go back over things. Break up the class so there's time for overlearning. If you give verbal instructions, make them brief and preferably one at a time, and support them maybe in a visual way. You can give them one instruction, make sure they've done it before you go on to the next one. You can have a series of instructions written down on a worksheet in the classroom. Safety instructions is an obvious one, having them on the wall. Even provide a checklist so that the pupils, as they go, can check off as they've done each task. All of these things help support working memory issues. So we've talked about working memory issues, which actually affect a lot of these students with a lot of these difficulties, but also we need to look about difficulties with reading and writing, and I've got a little simulation of that as well. How does it feel in these situations? For example, if you have difficulties reading, which may come from dyslexia, it makes it harder to read standard text. Often the words are divided up for you in a different way. The spaces become blurred, and so it's hard to deal with. This, for example, you might find hard to read. Give it a go. You'll find it takes longer to read, even though the words are in English, the gaps are in the wrong place. This simulates, slightly obviously, what a dyslexic person might find. And the problem with reading something like this is that you, A, take longer to read it, but secondly, you get tireder because you're having to concentrate. You might also have difficulties recording information, so not just reading it, but then writing it down. And a lot of teachers depend on people copying. Imagine you had to copy the following paragraph. I think a lot of you may not speak Welsh. If you do, then That's fantastic. But this is in Welsh. Imagine having to copy this. Give it a go. Even the first two words, you have to really keep looking up to copy. You look down at your paper, you look up to copy. It takes longer, it's more stressful. And a lot of people with visual difficulties may find that the text on the board or even on the screen moves around or is blurred. And trying to make sense of this, it makes your head hurt, doesn't it? And it's hard to see. So, how do these difficulties, they're simulated, with reading and copying make you feel? Often it makes you feel stupid, it makes you feel tired. So what can we do? Very obviously, if giving extra time helps a lot. Allowing people to take longer to do things, it really gives them a feeling of, where they can relax a little bit more, not timing them too specifically. Producing materials in advance, giving out worksheets or giving them out on the screen in advance is a really helpful thing. Just giving them a little clue as to what they're going to be reading. Try not to rely on copying from the board or screen, and if you do, make sure that you give them enough time to do it. Make materials in bigger font, pre-teach key words, and summarize things at regular intervals so it supports the confidence. With reading, teach active reading techniques, and that's a whole other presentation sometime maybe. Reading techniques which involve skimming and scanning, starting with things that you know already, questioning techniques, reflecting and reviewing as students read text so that it doesn't seem too big a task. When you put things on the board or even on the screen, try and use fonts that are more dyslexic friendly, not Times New Roman, which has that extra serif on it. Arial or Comic Sans are just easier to read. Avoid underlining or italics, which actually are very stressful for people with visual difficulties. Just use bold for emphasis if you need to. Change your background of your screens to light blue or beige. This is a light blue or a grey background. And there are lots of other ideas on the British Dyslexia website for ways of making things more dyslexia friendly. Really simple advice is not to put too much text on one slide or one worksheet and break up any information into small chunks because it makes it more accessible. Similarly, we've looked at working memory then as a difficulty. We've looked at reading and writing difficulties. Attention difficulty presents a lot of barriers to learning. And again, just to simulate what that might feel like, I've tried this when I'm working with groups. If partner A recites the alphabet backwards, it's reasonably easy until their friend tries to distract them by jumping up and down or tapping them on the head or saying silly things to them. Then it becomes incredibly difficult to recite the alphabet backwards. Or indeed, if you're trying to do a sum while your partner tries to distract you, you can imagine that sum, easy though it is, or relatively easy though it is, it gets more difficult if you're being distracted. And people with attention difficulty face this all the time. They're distracted by sounds, by thoughts in their head, by people around them, by sensations, by smells, and you can't complete a task. Often you give up. You think you're stupid because you can't get it done. You might phase out and you've lost track of where the teacher is. So you get frustrated, you get tired, and because you're tired and feeling stupid, you muck about or you lose confidence. And it has a difficult effect in the classroom as well. So what can the teacher, what can we, what can the other students do to help? Well, breaking things up into short tasks, yet again, helps. One thing at a time, step by step, and then giving feedback at each step. So you've written a paragraph. Oh, that's an excellent paragraph. Have you completed that paragraph? Oh, yes, you have. That looks good. And then moving on after that. Again, repeating things really helps because often if a student has phased out, they actually haven't heard what you said. Making it fun, making it active. Students, as we know, the more active learning is, the more they're likely to retain. Using all the senses, drawing things, acting it out, being funny, singing maybe. And a bit of advice that is good for all sorts of teaching, being positive, not negative, saying, well, that's nearly right. Oh, that's a good idea, but let's also look at doing this. Or good start. Let's looking at how we can improve it rather than being negative from the start. For some students with learning with attention difficulties, the use of fidget toys, even blue tack in the hand is really helpful if they are always fidgeting, and allow them to do it because it helps them concentrate. Give them movement breaks, encourage them to follow you around the classroom with their eyes. Build on the positive because a lot of students with many of these learning difficulties are often highly skilled and creative and quick thinking. Use their skills as much as possible. Give them a role in the class, something that they can do, a leading role often. Make them class monitor, make them the person who goes and collects the worksheets and gives them out, or instructs people, or gives the dictation, or whatever it might be. Give them a role, build on their positive skills. Similarly, with students with autism have incredible skills. They have challenges, though, the lack of social awareness being one of the main ones. It means that they won't pick up on verbal and facial clues. They take things literally. They may smile or laugh inappropriately because they're not understanding what exactly they should be doing at a particular time. And they often may be zoning out because they're not aware that the instructions are aimed at them. They won't notice what other people are doing in the class. So that means that they are often not at the place you expect them to be. Also, they get anxious and they have poor self-esteem, often because they hate change, which increases their anxiety. They need personal space, and often because they're sensitive and hate loud noises, bright lights, strong smells in the class. You can imagine when you're changing things all the time, you're changing place, you're changing classrooms, how much more difficult that is for students who have hypersensitivity. Many students with ASD suffer from poor self-esteem as a result. So what can we do? Well, the change thing, if you can, and of course there are some situations where you can't, but if you can, give as much warning of change as possible. Make your lessons as structured as possible so that they know what to expect. Plan ahead and then give them gentle encouragement. Don't shout. This is something that I keep repeating. Shouting is not helpful in most situations. Give students time to react to things. Give them time. They may react unpredictably. Both students with attention difficulty and students with ASD can react unpredictably and have no sense of consequences. They might be just trying to communicate, and they often feel vulnerable. So they might react badly to criticism, which may appear like bad behavior, but it's often because they're just trying to explain something. How can we deal with this? Well, calmness is a solution to many things, isn't it? If you respond with shouting, then that won't help. It just escalates the situation. The more they shout, the quieter you can get, if possible. Give positive instructions. We've said this before, not negative instructions. For example, stand still rather than stop fidgeting. There's a lot of help on the Autism Society website, and a lot more to say about that as well. But we've looked at common themes from wherever the difficulties come. These are often the result: anxiety, low self-esteem, and frustration. So common strategies to help. Time is a key. Give your time. Be patient. Be prepared to recognize the differences that you have in your classroom. Remember that you may have students with working memory difficulties who didn't hear those instructions. Remember that you may have students who didn't finish copying down from the board. Remember that you may have students who couldn't read what you had written, or are feeling worried because they zoned out at a particular time and missed half of what you said, or are actually feeling anxious because there's a loud noise outside the classroom and that means that they are more and more anxious. So be prepared to recognize those differences and play to strengths, because as we said earlier, a lot of the students that you are dealing with autism or with attention difficulties actually have huge strengths, and play to their individual strengths and build up their confidence, use them, give them roles. Be prepared to adapt your teaching methods and resources and break down material into smaller tasks. Try and be positive at all times. It's not as easy to do as that, obviously, but as much as possible, being positive really helps. Giving feedback as soon as you can. Now, I realise that in this forum, I'm not able to give you feedback. I'm not able to do a lot of what I've just been saying. But all classrooms are neurodiverse. And if we can support students with specific learning difficulties, we'll also improve learning for everybody. So it's worth doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alison, for that fascinating talk, that fascinating presentation. I said I have heard it before, but even second time around, it's such an eye-opener. Thank you so much for giving us of your experience. So everyone who is listening, please feel free to think of if you have any questions for Alison. You can be thinking about those, you can be typing them in the chat, or you can raise a hand, whatever you're most comfortable with. Yes, as I said, for me, it's definitely a real eye-opener. I think, you hear people talking about ADHD or autism, but you don't always appreciate how those will manifest. So for me, that was actually really interesting just to think about, oh, well, when you see students acting in a particular way, it may be that you assume they're just being naughty or difficult, but in fact, there could be other reasons. At EduSpots, when we have our club sessions, we do have a kind of educational principles that we try to stick to. So I was happy to see that. Sorry, there's a bit of noise in the background here. We do try to encourage, like a fun, active environment. And because it's a club, it's not a classroom. So, it's easier. We don't have tests and exams and things. So then, yes, you can give students more time. And also we do talk about varying the way that you teach things. When we give our challenges, we often do have a mixture of, maybe they're writing a short report, but they could also sing a song or make a model. So we do try and encourage those. So I'm quite happy to see that those those kind of fit in with what you were saying.
Different methods of recording, for example, teaching mind maps, this sort of thing. Different approaches, really good. That sounds great. Yeah.
So any questions from our audience? I know with our catalysts, quite a lot of them are teachers. So some of them, teach in the classroom as well as teaching our club sessions, and others, others are not. So we have quite a wide variety. Do feel free if you have any classes. Sorry, if you have any questions, sorry.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a question which actually somebody asked, at your last session, which was about this idea of that you often hear that students have different learning methods. So some of the people, you hear people saying, oh, some students are visual learners and some are auditory learners and that kind of thing. So you're kind of categorizing people in different ways. I just wanted to get your views on that.
Yeah, I think that was always a sort of traditional thinking, wasn't it? That you had a particular way of learning and that we should be learning in that way. But I think as teachers and also as learners, the more we can use all methods for learning, the better we're going to perform. So I think we need to be a bit wary of just teaching in a visual way to a visual learner, what we might think of as a visual learner, but be able to support visual learning with, for example, auditory learning, a bit like I was saying, if you're giving auditory verbal instructions, if you can support it with visuals, that's going to help both types of strengths. So we all have strengths and weaknesses, don't we? But I think we need to be encouraging the whole approach rather than trying to look at just one individual approach. And they say, I think, that if you do what you are learning, most people will learn even more if you can actually teach somebody else, for example. And then that's something that I've found very helpful, is that if you have pairings, peers supporting each other, then one person may be a stronger visual learner and the other person build up the strength in your areas of more weakness, perhaps, as well. And peer learning like that is great. Partnering people and getting them to teach each other what you've just learned. We were just talking about repeating and allowing overlearning, and putting students into pairs and allowing them to teach each other is another good way of doing that, and supports the different ways of learning that you're talking about. Yeah.
Yes, actually, that's very interesting, the idea of pairing. We also do encourage a lot of group work and collaboration. And I know in the EduLit, they talk about having reading buddies, where they pair, I think, like a stronger reader with a weaker reader. But that's interesting, the idea of using it not just for reading, but for, sort of any sessions to help them go through the material that they've learned. So
yes. Exactly. Yes, recapping and things. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Any questions from anybody? Do feel free. Anything you'd like to ask? Just checking, is there anything in the I actually wondered from our in fact, I'm going to ask a question to our some of our catalysts, whether any of you have had experience with students, whether you've known they have a particular diagnosis or not, and also if I don't know if teachers, when you have your teacher training, is there much discussion or much information given about students with these kind of difficulties? I know there is, like an Autism Society of Ghana. I know there are people here who do know about these, but I don't know if any of the teachers in the room, when you're training, do you get much information about neurodiverse learners? If anyone has any insights, do let me know.
It's difficult moving their hands and other things, but we include them in our classroom to have special treatment for those children.
Thank you, Auntie Janet. Do you think, I'm just wondering, I mean, is there enough support, do you think, for Ghana teachers? I know sometimes the classrooms are very large with a lot of students. Do you think most teachers are kind of equipped enough to help these students, or is more support needed?
Yes, at times in a class you may find only one person in the class of about 25, 30 or 40. You may have just one person among who has that special treatment. So normally when the parent brings those children to school, they make the teachers aware that is the problem. At first, parents don't send those children to school at all. But later they found out that when they come to class, they're able to learn, they're able to do certain things, which help them in the home. I remember at first when I was in Amiel, there was a girl who was called Jane, like my name. So I liked that girl so much. So I told Madam that the KG Madam that they should allow her to do every activity. They shouldn't let her stay in the class as if she's having a problem, so they are not going to attend to her. They should allow her to write. They should allow her to do all activity. And lo and behold, when the teachers did that to the girl, later she was writing. Fortunate thing is that when he was going to P1, the parents just take her away from the school. So we couldn't trace the girl again. And I met another girl in JHS1. She was called Ja. This girl was not able to write, but he was able to speak. Because when we were in the primary school, they weren't allowing her to write. So she doesn't have the writing skill at all. So I started helping the girl and look as if I'm just worrying her. As for Madam, you see, but later she appreciated that she need to write. But later they couldn't, because she couldn't write, she passed through the school without examination. But she can do household chores, do everything. But because of the writing, couldn't write the BC. So he just passed through the school. Yeah, so and she's doing well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Janet. Thank you, Madam Janet. Yes, it's very interesting to hear yes, actual real examples of what's happening. So it sounds like there's a lot of awareness needed, obviously not just for the teachers, also for the parents. I think a lot of parents in Ghana, if you don't know about these different issues, people are sort of worried, scared. They sometimes think, yes, let's just keep the children at home. They don't always want to send them to school. So yes, I think in Ghana we did a lot more education and awareness of all these issues. Okay. Any other questions or comments? I know we just have a few announcements at the end in a couple of minutes. I think I liked what you said right at the end there, Alison, about if you kind of adapt your classroom or change your teaching so that you're
really, for everybody, not just for students with any difficulties. And, things like remaining calm and not shouting. These are things that, if we can, I'm not saying it's always easy, but, it's good practice for all students, isn't it? Not doesn't mean there's only one person with difficulty. Actually, there are probably 10% of every classroom have some sort of difficulty, probably, that are undiagnosed. Certainly in the UK, of students, it is recognised, have some sort of difficulty. So it is quite likely that even though you don't know it, there are students in your classroom who have these difficulties. So teaching as if you are teaching a class full of students with difficulties, you're not going to harm the teaching. I suppose that would be my message. Yeah.
Exactly. Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much, Alison. Any last final questions or comments before we just go to announcements? I hope that everyone can take everything in, and I think it's useful to, this came up in the academy, I think, that we've been having a series of regional academies about when you listen to a talk, to maybe just make sure you reflect on it and maybe just think about one thing that you could do in your next session or your next class that is drawing from what you've learned from Alison today. I think that would be very helpful for everyone. So Alison, thank you so much for a really fascinating talk. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I think we're just going to finish with a few announcements. Farida, will you do the announcement?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you, Alison, for that amazing session. So just a little announcement. We have the Big Give campaign coming up. If you're new in EduSpots, then this is new. If not, I'm sure you're used to this. So it's a campaign where every donation that is received through the Big Give link, which is EduSpots specific Big Give link, is doubled. So this is like the best time to support EduSpots work. And for this campaign, we are igniting digital equity for our learners, over 10,000 learners in all our communities. So by giving to EduSpots this period, you're going to help us buy Wi-Fi kits, purchase tablets, laptops, projectors. And I think this is like the best time to support EduSpots. So it's launching on the 3rd of December, which is next week, Tuesday. So please look out for our stories, our posts, and they will all contain the donation link. So you can share them with your people in your network. You can also donate, but please get behind it as much as possible. We'll appreciate that. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. If you would like more information about the Big Give, it's also on our website in the news section, but I'm going to also put it in the comments section so you can read more about it in the chat. So you can read more about it. So the link is in the chat. You can read more about the Big Give. And then please subscribe to our newsletter. Once you head to our website, there will be a pop-up to ask you to subscribe to our newsletter. Please feel free to subscribe. If you see our posts on social media, please follow, like, share. We'd appreciate that. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. We're very on time.